Welcome to the Life Mindset Mentorcast, the podcast that gives you practical spiritual tools that you need every week to very practically dominate stress, anxiety, fear, and depression. We will give you the basic components of a powerful mindset. We make it as easy as A, B, C for more life, more peace, and more power. I am your host, Lady Katura, and co hosting with me is the amazing.
Zainal Fuego, the Christ hematologist.
In today's episode, we are actually going to talk on a really interesting topic, something that affects every relationship to some extent, how anxiety and stress affects your relationship. And we're going to elaborate a bit on why it is important to maintain a clean mental state in your relationship. Now, in our previous podcast, we covered powerful ways to eliminate anxiety. We identified how to eliminate stress through mindfulness. But it's important that we actually cover the topic of stress in your relationship because if you are in a romantic relationship and you have a partner, spouse, whether you're married or not, if you do not learn how to identify stress and deal with it, it is going to have repercussions in your relationship. So, we're going to start by identifying three ways that anxiety and stress can affect your intimate relationship. As I said, these are common issues with couples that are affected by it. So, let's get right into it. So, number one, we have shame, guilt, and resentment. What do you mean by that? A person who is experiencing depression or anxiety, stress, may find it difficult to follow through with their responsibilities. Now, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. Maybe it's like household chores or assisting with the children or whatever the case is. And as a result, their partner feels the brunt of the responsibilities, and this may lead to feelings of disappointment, rejection, and even cause some disconnection in the relationship. So, we're identifying these points one by one as we go through. We're going to give some commentary on it and share with our listeners how it actually affects your relationship, and we'll give a little insight as to how you can help or the benefits of it when you eliminate it from your relationship or from your life. So for the person who is suffering from anxiety, stress, frustration, they also will experience exhaustion, and as a result not be able to contribute in a form of equity in the relationship. Is that something you can relate to, Zane?
So, what you're saying is that the person who is actually suffering anxiety is no longer functioning in their responsibilities regarding the
Exactly.
relationship, whatever the responsibilities are in the relationship, and their partner is the one that's actually experiencing the disappointment, rejection, and disconnection.
Yes. So the partner on the other side is going to experience that because, I mean, it's supposed to be a partnership where two persons are working together. And if one is on the other side not able to contribute or do their fair share of the relationship load, so to speak, somebody on the other side now is going to end up with the frustration
But
and feeling the exhaustion.
that pretty much defines the common relationship today.
Yeah.
And nobody's really actually pausing to stop and consider that there is a presence of anxiety and probably anxiety, stress, fear, and as a result, the person is distracted
Yeah.
because the anxiety, the stress, or the fear is really an alarm, internal alarm system that actually identifies that the logic that you presently have is no longer applicable in the circumstances or the conundrum that you found yourself in, and you are pretty much mentally paralyzed or spiritually paralyzed. And the only thing that you're doing there is actually venting the fear, venting the anxiety, as well as the stress. So you're going to be distracted, number one. And I think that is something that everybody right now in this pandemic has actually been facing in a relationship.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, it exists. It's around us. I've heard so many cases of it. I've been reading so much about it. Even having discussions with people on it, where the effects of the pandemic has actually brought on, I'd say like a dark cloud or heaviness in relationship, especially where there are also children involved. Because now people who don't understand how to deal with stress, how to eliminate it, they often resort to taking medication to help with lowering the heart rate and the symptoms of stress and anxiety. And even
Yeah,
that in itself,
that that right there is actually one of the disadvantages of the westernized society, where the westernized society has no pretty pretty much has no comprehension of how one's spirit or mind energetically reflects on the body.
right?
And as a result, westernized perspectives of care or attention actually take into consideration the body as the only point of attention, and so they treat everything that hits the body as though it is a an infirmity or disease.
Yeah.
And that is not a malicious attempt by doctors. It's just the nature of the westernized society, just the nature of the Western perspective, that they actually treat the body alone. And so anything that the body is experiencing to them is to the system or to the perspective, it is an abnormality. And if it is an abnormality, then it has to be an infirmity of the body, or a syndrome or a mental syndrome. And so you have all of these titles being thrown around, and then basically there is there arises the necessity to administer medication for something that can simply be adjusted if we just identify the root of the person's mental state.
Right. Which is why we're here, to
Right.
identify, to apply what we, the pneumatology, to the ancient Hebrew perspective and deal with the root of the problem, which is the mindset,
And I mean,
rather than
but
treating with not that we see medication as a bad thing. It has its function and so on, but it acts like a suppressant. It doesn't actually rectify the problem in this case.
and this is something that you see all over social media. There is Facebook, well, for TikTok, in for one in particular, there is a strong presence of people in this pandemic that actually were through into situations that they were not very much accustomed to. And not being accustomed to the situations, they actually ended up suffering from strong senses of anxiety. Like, for example, a simple example of that is when we were thrown into pandemic, there were certain people who found themselves in situations where the logic that they were working with did not equip them to deal with the sudden change.
Yeah.
So for some couples, they only saw each other for like 3 to 3 hours for the day, where they go to work and they come back home, and for 3 hours they interface with their spouse, and then they go to sleep and arise, and the routine continues. So for them in particular, maintaining a relationship was not something that was a priority. The career was the priority, or work was priority, and you just spend the time that you're off work with this particular individual. When with this pandemic in particular, it switched the entire environment where everybody had to stay home. So you're taking people who actually, in this particular scenario, you're looking at people who were pretty much out there for seeing their spouse 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours for the day maximum. Some even less than that. And now they're in a situation where they have to. Now they're in a situation where they have to adjust to learning. Well, they have to adjust to an environment, to a situation where there is literally 24 hours a day with this person.
And that
So,
that in itself is stressful for
so their
them.
3 hour logic became obsolete immediately. And so they found themselves in a situation where they required logic to actually have a functional relationship. And they were not equipped to that they're not equipped with that, it put them in a position of paralysis, mental paralysis, and then there comes the stress, there comes the anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
there comes the depression if it's not functioning favorably. So, all of these factors must be taken into consideration there. But when I say all these factors, all these different contexts must be taken into consideration. For those of you who are listening to this, you may be facing that in your own way, but it's still the same factor. Your logic is not applicable in the situation. You're in a state of paralysis, not knowing what to do to come out of it, and that is actually what is producing the fruit, the leaves of anxiety, stress, depression, fear.
Exactly. So as you're identifying those things, just dealing with the anxiety as a matter of fact just means that you need to adopt a new logic, a functional logic to deal with the
Right.
situation. So we're gonna actually go on to the second point. We identify we're looking at three ways anxiety and stress can affect an intimate relationship. And the first one we
Right.
identify was shame, guilt, and resentment. So within the relationship, those feelings may be stirring shame for the one who is dealing with the anxiety because they're unable to pull their part, to pull through with their responsibilities, guilt on their end, and resentment for the person who is on the receiving end may start building resentment towards the person because they no longer have a functioning relationship. The second point is
Right.
intimacy problems. So research has shown that stress can interfere with your sexual desire as well as your sexual drive, and it can make a person disinterested in sex. Sometimes the condition itself affects. Sometimes the condition in itself is as a result of treatment from medication. So, if someone is
Yeah.
on the anxiety tablets, those things have side effects, and that can be triggers for the low sex drive in some cases. And many people with stress have also reported feeling inadequate and sometimes have performance anxiety. Because once you start anxiety in one category of your life, it just trickles into everything. You can't really control where it is executed. But in
Right.
any case, for both parties, this is definitely a dampener in relationships and in the sexual connection access, especially. So, definitely, anxiety and stress does interfere with the bond, the bonding, the intimacy.
Well,
So,
naturally, because I mean,
mhm,
your spirit. I mean, from our research at the institute, we see that your spirit could actually hone in on one thing at a time. A lot of people
yeah,
actually in the society have grown to feel as though they have some sort of a badge or a trophy or wearing like a medal around the neck that they can multitask. And it's really self lies taking place there. Because
exactly.
you can multitask, but multitasking requires that you do not involve your mind does not actually have enough time to follow through on one particular task and actually give any depth. Multitaskers are very shallow thinkers because they don't
So, are
actually
you?
spend time on anything. One thing, any
Mhm.
one thing in particular to be able to explore it. Does that make sense?
It does. So, are you saying that in this case, the anxiety would be taking up most of your mental space,
Yeah,
and as a result, you will not be able to
exactly,
distribute energy in other areas?
exactly. Because if you actually if you are actually functioning in a way that you are being affected by anxiety, then your mind is pretty much occupied with the sense of stagnancy that you're experiencing or the sense of mental paralysis that you're experiencing.
Hmm.
Therefore, you cannot divulge. You cannot look at any other direction. You cannot look at anything that requires that you give of yourself and give of your energy.
Yeah, that's deep. That's some pneumatology there.
Yeah. So you can't really, I mean, you can't really do that. And multitaskers in particular, they think about it. If you actually stress in one area, then then you can't then you cannot actually have any depth in your sexual connection.
Hmm. Yeah. As you said, multitasking is like a shallow. People who multitask have actually shallow. What did you say? Shallow minds.
They're shallow thinkers. They can't really
Shallow
spend
thinkers,
spend
right?
time. You realize that they are accustomed because of the lifestyle of multitasking, that they are accustomed actually touching something for a few seconds or
Yes.
just a couple minutes. They just touch it, and
Right. Right.
and if you actually want to build a sexual connection and actually foster a sexual relationship, you can't really engage in activity for a couple of seconds
No.
or a couple of minutes. And if it's a couple of minutes, then you're not really having a sexual relationship. You're really having touch and go connections in the sexual on the sexual note.
Hmm.
Just just touch and go, come for a fix,
Food for
basically.
thought. Indeed. Well, this is thought provoking. So, if we have any listeners who happen to be multitaskers, we would like to encourage you to reassess that perspective because it's definitely going to affect your intimacy.
And especially this is not only specific to multitaskers, but in particular, taking into consideration anxiety in and of itself. If you're trying to live life while suffering from anxiety and multitasking,
Hmm. So true. Yes. Wow. That's really good. So, in essence, well, actually, when we do the second half of the podcast, we'll come back on these things and identify some solutions here. The third point that I want to get to here is relational negligence. That basically, relational negligence in relationships stifles the life out of it. And when I say that, the negligent partner usually does not take responsibility for their emotional needs. And as a result, they're imposing it on the other partner. So basically, they're expecting the other partner to comfort their unspoken emotional needs. All of this as a
yeah,
result of not dealing with stress and anxiety. See how it affects the relationship? And depending on the codependency, because this is a form of codependency related to the anxiety that they're experiencing, they will also have a feelings of self-worth, lack of self-worth, feel incompetent, and all of these feelings they may transfer it into the relationship and now expect the other partner to make them feel good, make them feel better about themselves, to validate them or approve them in the
right,
relationship. And
yeah,
that is a form of oppression for the person who is on the other side of the fence. So, this basically, these 3 points we identified here, the if you are relating to any, if you can relate to any one of them, we would like you to assess. Sit down and give some thought to your logic and assess whether or not it's actually beneficial to hold on to the same logic, apply it, experience anxiety, and then have repercussions in your romantic relationship. What we're going to do is pause for a short break here, and when we return, we are going to briefly discuss the benefits of functioning from a self existent mindset, or basically functioning from the mindset, a healthy mindset that is not stressed and not anxious. We'll be right back. You are listening to the Life Mindset Mentorcast, the podcast that gives you the tools that you need every week to very practically dominate stress, anxiety, fear, and depression. Verified by pragmatic and experimental research of the Zinke Kitsura International Institute of Pneumatology. We give you the basic components of a powerful mindset. We make it as easy as A, B, C. You can also find content by Zine and Kitsura through www.internationalinstituteofpneumatology.com. To access weekly episodes of this podcast, other resources, and mentorship, become a Silver Star member at www.patreon.com/scene underscore ale underscore fuego. More life, more peace, more power. Welcome to the second half of our episode. So, in the first half, we went through 3 ways that anxiety and stress, depression can affect an intimate relationship negatively. Now we're going to actually have a look at the good side of it. So when you're functioning from a self-existent mindset, which is what Zane and myself promote and fully endorse, teach you how to function from self-existence. What you are going to experience in your relationship is one, appreciation, regard, and honor. So instead of shame, guilt, and resentment, on the flip side, instead of having turbulence as a result of the partner taking on the extra responsibilities and so on, there will be an atmosphere where both partners can be at peace. Zane, based on what you have taught and also for yourself tested and experienced through pneumatology, applying it in relationships with your coaching and so on, I would like you just for a brief moment to share with our listeners here how functioning from that mindset, addressing the stress and the anxiety, positively affects the relationship in the context of what we're talking about here.
Well, the first thing that we should that I think I should actually give some attention to is what that looks like, so that people can actually understand the context of the appreciation, regard, the honor that you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when dealing with stress in particular, stress, anxiety, depression, fear, all of these things are externally motivated factors, right? Which means that you are whatever you is stressing you out, you are emotionally attached to. Whatever is causing anxiety, you are attached it in some form or fashion for security or for or to give you some sort of some sense of identity or some sense of purpose.
Yeah.
It's something that you're using as an external factor. Now, one of the things that the scriptures, in particular, the ancient Hebrew scriptures, actually teach is that is the Adamic conundrum. That you were not created to function like that. You're created to function self-existently, and self-existently simply means that you are created to function from what has been breathed into you. Just like a lion, in particular, I always use this. Just as a lion is designed to function from its nature, and it does not use a hyena and compare itself to a hyena to function. So we were not meant to use external comparisons to function. We actually designed to function according to what is our nature. And so in the scriptures in particular, it actually gives a definition of what that is. And from there, what we encourage persons to do is to begin to function self-existently, meaning number one, that you function from what your nature is as it is defined. And number two, that you view life self-existently. So what I encourage persons to do in this case is to begin to view their life, well, using a modern day example, as though they are the president or the king of their life, and their
Mm-hmm.
life in this case would be their state, their country, or their kingdom, and they see every aspect of their life as a department, and they view those things as independent departments. So in viewing those things as independent departments, they're able to manage it, which means you actually constantly assess it, identify the logic that you're applying, and if it is dysfunctional, then a reassessment of that logic must take place to be able to identify a more functional logic so that you can have more practical results, you have better solutions.
And in applying that, you're saying it also in the context of relationships would yield the results of regard and honor, functioning from that mindset that you're identifying.
Yeah. So
This
in that context, what you're looking at is by doing that, by functioning from that perspective, you are no longer being motivated by anything external. And if you're not being motivated by anything external, then things like appreciation, regard, and honor that you're talking about here, which of course is in response to the first thing that we mentioned, the idea of shame, guilt, and resentment, you would actually be able to function and give attention to the responsibilities that you have in your relationship. But you
right.
must actually be functioning from the perspective of independence of all things and seeing these things as independent of you and manageable areas of your life.
Which actually gives context now to the second point I was going to raise, which is it functioning from the mindset that you're identifying there from self existence means that in the atmosphere of the relationship, there's going to be intimacy. It leaves the opportunity to build intimacy without reservation. So instead of feeling inadequate, as you were saying, and functioning from your breath, from who you are, now you allow the, as you're saying, you're no longer being double minded or splitting your attention, so to speak. But in the context of the relationship, you take away the anxiety and function from that self existence. It leaves room now for even sexual confidence and being able to contribute to the relationship in that manner, in a very positive manner that
Well,
also encourages. Mhm. You were saying
well,
something?
I wouldn't put it exactly like that. I said I wouldn't put it exactly like that, where you're actually thinking about the fact that you are just trying to eliminate the sex so that you can have more sexual confidence. Because to those who are listening, they might actually hear that, and they may actually run with the fact that, okay, but I just need to eliminate the anxiety or the
Hmm.
stress, and that in particular would have a better sexual connection. But it is not that. What I want to actually emphasize, it is self-existently living in particular and seeing everything as manageable areas. Like you are the leader of your kingdom, and your kingdom is your life. You're the president or the king or the emperor of your kingdom, and you see every area of your life, even your sexual relationship, as independent of you and not be emotionally tied to it and using it for personal validation or sense of self-worth or sense of security or sense of self-approval. You approaching it independently and managing it means that you are no longer um, motivated by something external. You're actually being driven by what is inside of you, and you are managing it, which means that you can actually put frameworks or logics, apply logic to each area and see the blossoming that you want to actually see.
Wow, I love how you put that.
It's what I call the govern mentality.
The government mentality. This is beautiful. And well, the third point we wanted to up with is relational responsibility. Because both parties are now holding themselves responsible, governing themselves, as you were saying, functioning from once both parties function from that governing mindset, it means that there is going to be a functional relationship where responsibilities are both taken care of on both sides and both parties live from the heart of equity. Standing on the outside without the emotional attachments to things external, they're able to, I would say, address each department as it should be addressed in a relationship. If you're looking
Right.
at it from the perspective of a president or a king, you look at the different areas and you're able to give what is necessary to have each area functioning and yielding the results that you really want them to yield.
Yeah. So all of those things, even in relationships where, but in sexual connection, sexual relationships, a lot of anxiety even comes from the relationship in of itself, because people actually tend to hold themselves responsible to external points of comparison, whether it's how their partner views them or what they have been told a good sexual partner is. And when they don't have the logic to perform or to meet the criteria that they have set by them for themselves, or they have allowed their partner to set for them, they've actually allowed the partner to define them according to that, or define them in the relationship, in the sexual connection, or allowing the partner to define them. They actually know, if they don't have the logic to meet the criteria that they have themselves put or the partner has put, they've allowed their partner to put, that causes stress.
Yeah.
And what happens there, when basically there are many people, many relationships. I know I sit down when I have time and I scroll through TikTok and I see the amount of relationships where people are just massively codependent. And even when in the sexual area, they're codependent on either what is defined as a good sexual partner, or many people fall into depression and suffer from low self-esteem and they come on these social media platforms actually speaking like the victim. But the problem is not your partner, the problem is you.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that you actually given your partner the responsibility to approve you.
Yeah.
You're giving your partner the responsibility to validate you and to actually establish your self-esteem. And yes, it feels like you're the victim because it feels like you giving, but all these things come with a lack of number one, or should I say not a lack of, but um, from some sort of identity codependency that you're giving people, things, and circumstances the responsibility to approve you.
Yes.
And when it doesn't happen, you are now in a state of depression and feeling sad, and then you begin to accuse the next person of not actually treating you like a queen. That's a whole lot of BS. Yeah, because you're actually now giving people the responsibility to approve you and to validate you, which means in doing that, whenever it is present, you're strong, and whenever it's absent, you're weak. You are not designed to function like that. You're designed to function from your nature and what has been breathed into you. If there is
Yes.
one text in particular that exists in history right now that actually gives you a definition as to what your energy contains, much like if you watch a lion and you see what the lion's nature contains, what really one text that defines that is the Hebrew scriptures.
Well, this is really good. I mean, this is definitely lends credibility what you're explaining it to why it is important to have a paradigm shift or mental shift in order to experience all the good stuff that we were just talking about.
Yeah,
It's
most
impossible to
definitely.
experience it with that logic that you may be working with or that perspective of yourself that is not objective.
Yep.
So this brings us to the end of today's episode. Seeing, is there anything you would like to add before we? How can people contact you if it is they're interested in getting some assistance to deal with their relationship issues or dealing with anxiety and stress?
The only thing I like to actually encourage our listeners to embrace self-analysis. If you actually experience anxiety, stress, fear, depression, these are not sicknesses, these are not infirmities. This is just actually a matter of this functional logic that you're applying. And all you need to do is to assess the existing logic and reorientate it to a functional logic, which will require some responsibility where you begin
Mhm.
to seek information to be able to identify what's the better functional solution here, what's the better logic to actually get results. And I also encourage everyone to consider self-existent living, meaning living and seeing every area of your life as departments. See yourself as the prime minister and the president of your life, and watch the departments and identify the logic why the department isn't functioning properly, and find the logic to help the department function more efficiently.
Boom. All right, so this is the Life Mindset Mentorcast, the podcast that gives you practical spiritual tools that you need every week to very practically dominate stress, anxiety, fear, and depression. We will give you the basic components of a powerful mindset, and we make it as easy as ABC for more life, more peace, and more power. I am your host, Lady Katrina, and our lovely co-host.
Zenith Figo, the Christ nematologist.
Yes, we encourage you to leave your takeaways, your comments, if you have any questions. And if it is necessary that you have to reach out to us, you can check us on www.patreon.com/CANE_EL_FUEGO. Fuego.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you want to actually have free consultation, because we also do mindset and emotional health coaching, telegram me um, at Zane the Master Coach. No spaces, one word, Zane the Master Coach. Boom.